You know, brother, sometimes when you see a game that scratches that itch, that's been on your back since dropping the belt at the last pay-per-view, you just have to take the bull by the horns and beat it into submission with your 24-inch pythons. And you know something, Jack? When you're chasing that nostalgic dream, you don't want to be dealing with all the jobbers. You want the real deal, brother. So what you gonna do when RetroMania Wrestling and its stable of free agent performers run wild on you? Well, for one, you won't be cutting promos as bad as I just did, but you will find out if Retrosoft Studios can capture the heart of Techno's 1991 arcade classic, WrestleFest. Boot up RetroMania and you'll immediately be Irish whipped into the turnbuckle with its fantastic music and splash screen. It's an appropriately grungy rock mashup that hits hard and brought me back to many Sega Genesis era stage themes and title tracks. Chrome-plated lettering accompanied by the entire roster in over-the-top cartoon styling show off what game modes you have to dive into that include Story, 10 Pounds of Gold, Retro Rumble, and Versus. You do have some graphic options to check out as well, and they're similar to what you'd have seen in the Xbox 360 arcade titles that used sprites, but honestly, it looks best when left alone. You can also turn shadows off if you're presumably playing this on a toaster, and you can also choose whether individual players have rings under them to help distinguish them in the ring. While the sprite work is fantastic, and some of the arenas remarkably well done, the commentary is outright bad and doesn't match the quality of the limited but stellar soundtrack.
This is devastation, pure and simple.
The one saving grace here is that even by default, the commentary is almost inaudible, aside from when it often gets incredibly repetitive. Even though RetroMania is made to hop in and play like any arcade title, I would strongly suggest cutting your teeth in story mode before doing anything else. I say that because while there is a menu option showing you what each button does at a basic level, there is no documentation outlining any other game mechanic. Grappling, for example, is likely to confuse the heck out of most players until they play story mode and have it loosely explained to them. According to one Steam review, it's similar to Fire Pro Wrestling in that there is a timing system that dictates your grappling success. It essentially boils down to engaging in a lockup and waiting for your wrestler to flash green before hitting one of the grappling buttons. If you time it right, and it isn't reversed, you can then go about your business of suplexing your opponents to death. Your ability to do certain strength levels of moves is determined by your momentum gauge being at a particular level as well, which is also explained only in the story mode. If you dive in before being told at least these two things, you're probably going to get your candy ass handed to you, in more ways than one. In fact, even after being given these basics, you're still likely to get smacked around like a greenhorn jobber because you'll soon discover that RetroMania Wrestling is relatively challenging. Some of that challenge, admittedly, is because the game just flat out doesn't explain some pretty important mechanics to you. You'll never be told about the reversal system, how to pick up your opponent from a ground state, how to execute ground moves instead of just stomping them, and how to do tag team moves and more. I found myself several times thinking I had finally cracked the code on picking up my opponent, for example, but discovered that I was just haphazardly doing it more than once in a row. I also, for the first few tag matches, had no idea that when you pin your opponent, you take control of your tag partner to help defend the pin from an attack by their tag partner, because normally, in singles, you just mash the A button to secure the pin. I eventually found a bit of a groove and got through most matches in often dominant fashion, but I never ended up feeling particularly confident in much of what I was doing. As for how the story mode plays out, it's about what you'd expect. You'll be lacing up the boots of one Johnny Retro as he claws himself back into the spotlight after having been badly beaten by a fellow wrestling rival. You'll be thrust into matches with much of the game's roster on your way to the top, and of course take part in all manner of match types, from singles through fatal four-ways and cage matches. RetroMania's roster is mostly a patchwork quilt of currently unsigned or readily licensable characters, largely hailing from ECW with a few others sprinkled in. If you're into more than just the current mainstream wrestling promotions, you'll likely recognize many of the names, most notably those of Tommy Dreamer, Zack Sabre Jr., Blue Meanie, and even the Road Warriors Animal and Hawk. It's a motley crew to be certain, but it's not exactly easy or cheap to get your hands on major superstars underneath the thumb of big wrestling. You'll be treated to some short, in-between match promo cutting and discussions with your partners and rivals when not in the ring, and there is some choice here as to how you react to certain plot points. These choices dictate who you'll be up against and partnering with, and while it's not exactly laden with variability, it does at least allow some room for a second playthrough should you want to see the differences. Given the disappointing brevity of story mode, this at least helps pad its length a bit. Once you've experienced all you want to in story mode, you can hop into one of the other game modes to have some more fun. 10 pounds of gold sees you take on the roster in succession through multiple bouts in all sorts of match types to obtain and then defend the championship title, much the way you would in the arcade. Retro Rumble is the Royal Rumble mode, which gives you some nice control over how many entrants take part, as well as how many can be in the ring at once, how much time between new entrants, and even if you want to watch the AI duke it out for your entertainment. Versus is the standard one-off match mode that lets you choose any match type, any of the game's 15 arenas, and the modifiers before squaring off with AI opponents or friends in local play. Match types include singles, tag team, 6-man tag, 8-man tag, cage matches, and the aforementioned Battle Royale. It's a good core package, but it would have been nice to be able to hold title matches and give belts to certain roster members. Not having online multiplayer is also a bit of a drag, as much as I'm thrilled anytime a game includes local multiplayer functionality. Coupled with the short story mode, the RetroMania price tag of $34 Canadian feels like sitting in the upper deck of the Silver Dome watching Hogan and Andre for the price of a front row seat. The wrestling itself does feel great when all cylinders are firing. RetroMania, in fact, gets one of the most nagging things found in any wrestling game, modern or otherwise, right, in that I've never once managed to accidentally grapple or strike an opponent I wasn't intending to when there were more than one in the ring. For as good as it feels, though, you are quickly reminded that this is a retro wrestling game, and movesets are limited. I do feel like there is a lot of room for more moves within the current control scheme, as many single-button combos are unused. It inevitably results in many matches feeling identical, even when you're trying to spice it up, which is a shame. Other than not being told how to do much in the ring, there are some other small gripes. Certain moments call for mashing a button, but this can lead to accidentally missed grapple timings, for example. AI wrestlers can also simply decide to go on a rampage without you so much as being able to counter a grapple, and will often comically do the same ground move several times in a row without recourse, just to shame you. Hitting a move off an Irish-whipped opponent on the ropes was inconsistent as well, and it's common to have a completely gassed AI wrestler jump to their feet like lightning after putting them through the ringer, ruining your ability to land a top rope maneuver or finish the match with a pin. Also, Dave Meltzer help you if you want to hit someone with a chair. RetroMania Wrestling is a hard game to place. On the one hand, it mostly hits the notes that you want a retro wrestling game to hit despite some issues. On the other hand, it's a limited experience in every way it can be, while asking a comparably steep price of admission. The challenge with games like this is that it's not cheap to do sprite work well, and it's not cheap to even have a small roster of real wrestlers either. With RetroSoft Studios teasing DLC on the horizon, an already questionable price tag is going to get pricier for a more reasonable amount of content. As it stands, I would be surprised if most people would be able to squeeze out more than just 8 to 12 hours of game time here, and that's really pushing it. I completed the story, 10 pounds of gold, and watched an entire AI Battle Royale inside of 3 or so hours. As it stands, RetroMania Wrestling is a mostly respectable spiritual successor to WrestleFest, but ultimately, it's only for the most die-hard fans of classic arcade wrestling games. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed the video, make sure you give the video a like, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell icon so you're notified when new content arrives. Want to support Critiqal Hit more directly? Visit our Patreon link in the description below to do just that. It helps keep us as ad-free as we can be here on YouTube and on our website. Thanks again, and see you on the next one.